What defines a knight in the realm of Westeros? For most folk scattered across the Seven Kingdoms, the answer appears plain, uncomplicated, and unchanging through generations. A knight wears spotless white Kingsguard cloth or polished steel plate, swears unbreakable fealty beneath the sacred blessing of a septon, and bears a family name untainted by scandal, cruelty, betrayal, or compromise of any kind. Chivalry, to the common farmer, tavern keeper, or small-folk child, is stitched into fine wool cloaks, spoken in rehearsed, polished oaths before gods and lords, and preserved within reputations that shine untarnished for decades, passed down from father to son without blemish. Yet the brutal, layered, morally grey truth of George Martin's meticulously built world crushes this simplistic, fairy tale vision of knighthood entirely. The most genuine, unyielding displays of knightly honour do not reside within the celebrated heroes lauded by bards, toasted by nobles, and held up as icons for the realm to emulate. Instead, pure, unselfish chivalry dwells within two men, branded irredeemable villains from the very opening moments of their on-screen journeys. Jaime Lannister, the universally reviled Kingslayer, and Jorah Mormont, the disgraced former Lord of Bear Island and once profiteering slave trader. These two figures carry mountains of public shame, permanently stained reputations, and life-altering choices that every corner of Westeros condemns as cowardly, treacherous, vicious, or unforgivable. Beneath their thick layers of infamy, scorn, and forced villainous personas, however, beats a far purer, more resilient chivalric heart than any white-cloaked Kingsguard tawny champion or rigid northern lord who parades flawless virtue solely for the applause of courts and crowds. This full analysis will dissect the vast, damaging gap between Westeros's performative, surface-level honor and authentic, action-driven chivalry. We will unpack the parallel struggles, quiet sacrifices, slow paths of redemption, and uncelebrated moral victories of Jaime Lannister and Jorah Mormont, two lifelong outcasts who lived as true knights while the entire world spat upon their names, judged them without context, and refused to see the goodness hidden beneath their well-known flaws. The illusion of spotless honor. Before we dive deep into the winding, painful lives of Jaime and Jorah, we must first carefully dismantle the false idol of flawless public honor that Westeros's nobility and peasantry alike worship so blindly and unquestioningly. The Seven Kingdoms endlessly elevates men like Barristan Selmy, the legendary white-cloaked Kingsguard, whose decades-long record of sworn royal loyalty seems, on paper, entirely unmarred by moral compromise. Loras Tyrell, the dashing, rose-adorned tawny knight, whose gallant gestures and poetic speeches of valor are sung in every roadside tavern across the Reach, even Eddard Ned Stark, whose rigid, unwavering devotion to his personal moral code made him a sacred symbol of unyielding integrity and northern pride. Each of these three men maintains a sterling, untarnished public image, their critical missteps softened, excused, or entirely ignored by a populace hungry for uncomplicated, black-and-white heroic figures to admire. Barristan stood rigid guard for Mad King Aerys Targaryen long after the monarch's unhinged madness threatened to incinerate every man, woman, and child living within King's Landing's walls, bound by the letter of his Kingsguard oath, even as countless innocent civilians faced annihilation in wildfire flames. Loras abandoned meaningful defensive wartime duty time and again to chase hollow glory in jousts and shallow court intrigue, his public chivalry nothing more than a performative spectacle crafted to win favor and admiration rather than a lived, tested moral code. Ned's inflexible, unyielding honor did cost him his own head, yes, but it also endangered his entire house, his wife, his 5 children, and every loyal bannerman sworn to House Stark, for his refusal to bend a single rule of principle left his family utterly vulnerable to Lannister retaliation and Littlefinger's scheming manipulation. Their reputations remain pristine to this day within fandom and Westeros lore, yet their supposed virtue proves hollow and ineffective in life or death. Moral moments, trapped within the rigid, restrictive boxes of formal oath and inherited title rather than rooted in real compassion, calculated sacrifice, and quiet moral courage. Contrast this flawed, performative framework with Jaime and Jorah, two men who openly broke societal rules, shattered formal sacred oaths, and bore endless public scorn and humiliation to protect the people they had sworn, in their own hearts, to care for and defend. The stark, vital question we must unpack today is impossible to avoid. Can a man become a greater, truer knight when he loses everything? The world falsely claims makes a person honorable, spotless fame, unbroken oaths, and an untarnished family legacy. Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer's silent sacrifice. Let us begin our dual character breakdown with Jaime Lannister, a man whose entire public identity is reduced to one single damning epithet, the Kingslayer. From the fateful night he drove his steel blade straight through Aerys Targaryen's pounding heart, within the Red Keep's stone throne room, Westeros judged him without pause, without context, and without a shred of mercy or empathy. Not a single soul across the Seven Kingdoms stopped to ask why a newly anointed Kingsguard would slay the monarch he had sworn to defend unto his dying breath. No lord, septon, or smallfolk paused to notice the hundreds of barrels of volatile wildfire stacked beneath every cobblestone street, cellar, and alley of King's Landing, the Mad King's deranged final plot to incinerate tens of thousands of helpless men, women, and children in a fiery purge of everyone he deemed a supposed traitor to his crown. Jaime's split-second choice was a brutal, absolutely necessary act of mass salvation for the capital's populace, yet the world saw nothing more than a knight who had violently broken his sacred, lifelong oath to his sovereign crown. The cruel label stuck fast, carving itself permanently into his identity for every decade that followed. To shield the gnawing guilt and unspoken, buried honor festering beneath his skin, Jaime embraced the cruel villain's mask the world had forced upon him, crafting a deliberately cynical, arrogantly detached persona to deflect scrutiny and hide his inner conflict. He pushed young Bran Stark from a high tower window solely to preserve his incestuous secret with twin sister Cersei Lannister, a choice born of crippling terror rather than inherent unprovoked cruelty. He feared total exposure would bring utter ruin to the entire Lannister family, a bloodline he was bound by kinship to protect at all costs. He openly mocked Ned Stark's earnest, devout devotion to rigid honor, sneering that honor itself was nothing more than a fool's childish game, because formal, society-defined honor had utterly failed him when he needed moral backing most. When he was captured by Robb Stark's northern army and his dominant sword hand was hacked away by the brute Vargo Hoat, Jaime lost the very physical tool that had defined him as a warrior, the only consistent outlet he had ever held to channel his immense fighting skill and tangled sense of right and wrong. Stripped of his sword, his immense Lannister wealth, and his swaggering public pride, he was forced to travel for miles alongside Brienne of Tarth, a plain, stout woman whose unwavering, earnest belief in pure chivalry chipped away at his defensive emotional walls piece by painful piece. Trapped within a blood-soaked bear pit, he fought a raging, starved beast, single-handedly to save Brienne from a grisly death, risking grave mauling or instant fatality for no gold reward, no tournament glory, no public praise, only because it was the morally just thing to do. He commissioned the Valyrian steel sword Oathkeeper and gifted it freely to Brienne, a physical, tangible symbol of the honest, uncorrupted knight he had always longed to become, even when the entire world stubbornly refused to recognize that hidden version of himself beneath the Kingslayer name. Later in the war, he abandoned Cersei's manipulative, violent schemes to march north and fight the apocalyptic White Walkers, standing shoulder to shoulder with northern soldiers who hated his Lannister bloodline, risking his life to defend a realm that had hated, slandered, and ostracized him for his entire adult life. Every step of Jaime's winding journey was marked by quiet, uncelebrated sacrifice of his public reputation, his personal pride, his sister's toxic favor, and ultimately his chance at a peaceful, beloved, respected life within the Seven Kingdoms. His brand of chivalry was never performative for crowds. It was hidden, buried under decades of relentless slander, visible only to the few people willing to look past the poisonous Kingslayer epithet and see the conflicted, good-hearted man underneath. Jorah Mormont, the exiled lord's path of humble redemption. If Jaime's crushing shame is loud, shouted, and publicly decried in every castle and village, Jorah Mormont's deep disgrace began in quiet, private ruin, unfolding long before he ever set foot on the foreign shores of Essos. Jorah was once the rightful lord of Bear Island, the heir to the widely honourable Jorah Mormont, a man respected and trusted across the north for decades of loyal, steady service sworn firmly to House Stark. Yet crippling financial greed and reckless, short-sighted poor judgment drove Jorah to commit an unforgivable crime by northern moral standards. He traded captured men and women into brutal chattel slavery to replenish his rapidly dwindling family fortunes, desperate to fund the wildly lavish, expensive lifestyle he maintained for his spoiled, high-born wife, Lynnis He Hightower. When Eddard Stark, Warden of the North, uncovered Jorah's illegal slave-trading operation, the former lord faced immediate execution per strict northern law. He fled Westeros in permanent exile, stripped entirely of his noble title, ancestral Bear Island lands, his childhood home, and every scrap of the respected noble reputation his father Jorah had spent a lifetime building from the ground up. He arrived in Essos, a shattered, broken fugitive, haunted day and night by his own catastrophic failures, and he struck a desperate bargain with the spymaster Varys. He would secretly spy on the young Targaryen exile Daenerys, hoping a royal pardon might one day grant him permission to return home to Bear Island. This initial act of transactional betrayal stands as Jorah's single greatest failing. Yet, unlike the performative, untested knights of Westeros, who never face meaningful, life-altering moral temptation, Jorah refused to remain trapped permanently within his sin and guilt. The longer he travelled beside Daenerys across Essos's harsh, unforgiving landscapes, the deeper his devotion to her flourished, shifting cold, transactional spy duty into genuine, selfless, unrequited loyalty. He witnessed her quiet resilience as a teenage bride sold off to the brutal Dothraki Khal Drogo, watched her hatch 3 ancient dragon eggs and rise unburned from funeral fire as the legendary Mother of Dragons, and observed her tireless, relentless fight to free thousands of enslaved men, women and children across the violent, slave-ridden bay cities of Slavers Bay. Jorah's overwhelming shame over his own past as a slave profiteer fueled a relentless, burning drive to atone for his mistakes, to fiercely protect the young queen who had dedicated her entire reign to ending the exact cruel slave trade he had once profited from for wealth and status. He stood faithfully beside her through every bloody battlefield, every treacherous noble betrayal, every plotted assassination attempt. He advised her wisely with grounded northern pragmatism to temper her fiery, impulsive royal rage, and he loved her silently, gently, never pushing his own romantic desires above her crown, her destiny, or her safety. When he contracted the fatal, flesh-rotting disease, grey scale, a plague that slowly corrupts skin, bone, and eventually twists the mind into violent madness, he fled Daenerys' side entirely of his own free will, terrified his contagious affliction would infect, weaken, or endanger the queen he swore to guard. He endured brutal, agonizing, near-lethal experimental treatment across distant, hostile foreign lands to cure his sickness, not for his own desire to live comfortably, but solely so he could return once more and stand in defense of his queen. Where Jaime's heavy burden was a hateful label forced upon him by outside public opinion, Jorah's lifelong burden was a genuine sin he had personally committed, a stain he could never erase with empty words alone, only with a lifetime of humble, uncelebrated loyal service and quiet, constant self-sacrifice. Parallel agonies, the shared burden of true chivalry. The core parallels binding Jaime Lannister and Jorah Mormont stretch far beyond surface-level public disgrace. Their innermost souls carry matching mirrored wounds, forged by practicing authentic chivalry inside a cruel world that actively punishes genuine human goodness. Both men endured crippling, permanent physical torment that served as a brutal physical reflection of their inner moral struggle. Jaime lost his dominant sword hand, the physical tool that had defined his power, skill, and entire warrior identity for decades. Jorah endured the searing, flesh-eating agony of grayscale, a visible plague that marked his body as permanently tainted, a perfect physical mirror for the stain of slave-trading sin marring his soul. Neither man ever sought fame, glory, or public admiration to reward their countless good deeds. Jaime saved an entire city from fiery annihilation, risked death to rescue Brienne, fought tirelessly against the undead White Walkers, and broke free from Cersei's cruel, manipulative grip-all without begging for public praise, royal pardon, or redemption from the realm that hated him. Jorah freed thousands of enslaved people by defending Daenerys' anti-slavery campaign, risked violent death hundreds of times over for his queen, endured years of exile and crippling disease to atone for his past, and never once begged the crown for restored noble titles or widespread public forgiveness. Both men loved fiercely, deeply, and their passionate attachments became another heavy layer of their lifelong suffering. Jaime's lifelong twisted love for twin sister Cersei trapped him inside decades of lies, secrecy, and moral sin, even as he fought desperately to break free of her toxic, controlling hold on his choices and identity. Jorah's quiet, unrequited love for Daenerys brought him endless quiet heartache as he accepted fully that he could never stand beside her as a royal consort, only as a sworn, humble bodyguard and protector. Most critically of all, both men entirely rejected the hollow, performative brand of honor cherished by Westeros's wealthy elite and court knights alike. They grasped a fundamental truth that pampered court knights and prideful lords refused to acknowledge. Sacred oaths are meant to be protective tools for shielding the vulnerable and innocent, not iron chains enforcing blind, unthinking obedience to cruel monarchs, corrupt noble houses, or meaningless titles. When an oath demands cruelty, mass destruction, or the slaughter of defenseless innocents, a truly honorable knight's highest loyalty belongs to humanity itself, not a crown, a family name, or a hollow title. Jaime broke his Kingsguard oath to save tens of thousands of King's Landing citizens from wildfire. Jorah broke his northern noble oath to chase personal redemption and protect a queen who fought tirelessly for the powerless and enslaved masses. The celebrated, beloved knights of Westeros clung rigidly to the exact letter of their written vows, even when the genuine spirit of chivalry died entirely beneath their blind, unthinking compliance. Jaime and Jorah followed the living, compassionate spirit of knighthood above all else, even when the rigid letter of law and formal oath condemned them both as irredeemable monsters fit only for scorn. Final fates and ultimate proof of their knighthood. Their tragic, conclusive final fates seal our central argument definitively. Jaime Lannister and Jorah Mormont stand as Westeros's truest, most unsung knights, even to the very end, when the world never fully recognized or rewarded their quiet, steady virtue. Jorah met his heroic end first, falling in brutal combat during the Great War against the apocalyptic White Walkers and their White Army. He threw his own body directly between Daenerys and the icy, deadly blade of an advancing White, absorbing a fatal stab wound solely to shield the woman he had spent years atoning to protect and serve. His death passed quietly, unheralded by travelling bards, grand noble funeral parades, or widespread kingdom-wide mourning. He died a humble, unranked bodyguard, not a restored Bear Island lord, his grayscale scars still visible across his skin, his old slave-trader sin never fully erased from the collective public memory of Westeros's people. Yet within that final, selfless sacrifice, he fulfilled every single core tenet of authentic chivalry without exception. Unwavering loyal protection of the innocent, total self-sacrifice for another's safety, and lifelong humble atonement for past mistakes. Jaime's devastating, tragic end followed shortly after, a sorrowful coda wrapping up his fractured, conflicted life's arc. After fighting valiantly and bravely alongside northern troops against the undead horde, he returned to a crumbling, collapsing Red Keep to stand beside Cersei as the castle crumbled to rubble around them. His final choice to die, intertwined with his sister, is frequently misread by casual viewers as a total regression back into his old, corrupted, selfish self. Yet it bears the unmistakable mark of his lifelong, messy humanity. He could not abandon the woman he had loved from boyhood onwards, even with full, unflinching awareness of her endless cruelty, corruption, and violent crimes against the realm. His life had never been a neat, straight line of flawless, perfect Hollywood redemption. It was a deeply human, messy struggle, swinging constantly between light virtue and dark temptation. The exact, messy, real struggle that defines authentic, lived chivalry, far removed from fairy tale perfect hero arcs. Unlike Barristan, who died still trapped by rigid oath-bound loyalty to unworthy, violent monarchs, unlike Ned, who died for inflexible personal principle that put his entire bloodline at mortal risk, unlike Loras, who died chasing hollow, empty court glory, Jaime and Jorah died fully living their own honest, unpolished versions of true knighthood. They never earned spotless reputations, made perfectly flawless moral choices, or gained the universal adoration of the Seven Kingdoms populace. What they achieved was infinitely more meaningful and spiritually profound. They chose goodness, sacrifice, and compassionate mercy, time and time again, even when every single voice surrounding them screamed that they were irredeemable, unworthy monsters beyond saving. To draw our full analysis to a firm, clear conclusion, the vast divide between performative, surface honor and genuine, action-fueled chivalry could not be more sharply defined when measured against the parallel lives of Jaime Lannister and Jorah Mormont. The Seven Kingdoms constructed a hollow, restrictive standard for what qualifies as a knight. Spotless white cloaks, unbroken public oaths recited before gods, untarnished ancestral family names, and loud applause from powerful lords and traveling bards. Anyone who fits this superficial mold is instantly hailed as a legendary hero, even when their rigid adherence to empty form allows real suffering, injustice, and mass cruelty to fester unchallenged across the realm. Jaime and Jorah reject this hollow, meaningless framework entirely. Their knighthood existed purely in consistent, brave action, not fancy apparel, in quiet, unadvertised sacrifice, not grand public speeches, in lifelong atonement and gentle mercy, not polished, unblemished reputations built for court approval. Infamy became their heavy, permanent cloak, crushing shame their lifelong burden, yet beneath that thick, weighty covering lay the purest, most steadfast hearts of knightly virtue found anywhere in all of Westeros. The timeless lesson woven into their two character arcs resonates far beyond the fictional borders of George Martin's fantasy world. True personal integrity is never measured by how flawless your public social image appears to outsiders. It is measured solely by how you choose to act when the whole world labels you a villain, when your name is permanently stained with scandal, when every easy, comfortable path leads to selfish ease, and every morally righteous path demands painful loss, suffering, and personal sacrifice. Now I pose this direct, open question to you. Do you believe Jaime Lannister and Jorah Mormont truly qualify as the greatest unsung, underappreciated knights in all of Westeros's recorded history? Or do you hold fast to the traditional old view that a heavily tainted, sinful past can never allow a person to become a genuine, honorable knight? Leave your detailed, reasoned thoughts and full arguments down in the comment section below, and share which of these two men's lifelong struggles resonates more deeply with your own understanding of morality, redemption, and what real honor truly means.